I'm Melissa Shanahan, and this is the Velocity Work Podcast, episode number 3. This podcast is for attorneys who are running their own firms. We explore tactics, tools, and stories related to pushing past simply lawyering well and into building a successful firm. Working in your firm and working on your business are two very different things. This podcast focuses on the latter. Well, hello there. Today, we are talking about allocating incoming revenue. This is one of the foundational things that I'm noticing hasn't been happening for incoming clients. They don't have a really good handle or really good grip on this. So we're going to talk a little bit about it because, and the reason I'm going to is because clients of mine, if you're listening, this is something that even if you have to get it together for me and for the Velocity Work experience and for that to be set up correctly for you and customized to you, what I'm noticing is that sometimes you don't stay on top of it. So this is something that I think could be a useful reminder, even if you are a client of mine, but also if you are not and you happen to be listening, I hope that there's some things in here that are great food for thought for you to be able to run with so that you can be smart about how you are running your firm. I'm going to start by talking about the profit first methodology. And the reason I'm doing that is not because I think that that's the only way to have your house in order, so to speak, to really understand what's going on financially in your business, but it is a great way. And so I'm going to talk about it. People I notice get stuck on profit first because they get hung up on doing it and following it perfectly. And what I have learned over time for my own business and then also working with clients is that I think it's okay to tweak some of the methodology, like take some of the core principles and make sure you're applying those really well. And then that's it, right? Like, and then customize it to fit you. Because the truth is, I think we all have a tendency to want to do things perfectly. I did when I was first implementing Profit First. I thought it sounded great. But there were some things missing for me and I tweaked it and I'm still really on top of everything in terms of the revenue and how I'm allocating it in my business. And it doesn't look exactly like what I read in the book, Profit First. So I thought I would share a little bit about that. Profit First methodology, whether you use it or whether you don't, the reason that I do love it is because number one, it forces you to take responsibility in a really simple way and have knowledge in a simple way about incoming revenue and then where you're allocating that money. We have a Velocity Work manifesto. One of the things that we talk about on that is we take responsibility for all of our thoughts, feelings, actions, and results. We don't blame, whine, complain, or hide. Well, the reason this fits so well is because when you get your ducks in a row and you start to really understand where your money is going and how much of it you actually have, you are taking responsibility for it. That is the first step to doing so, is just an awareness of what is there and what does this currently look like for my firm, for my business. We don't blame, whine, complain, or hide. I mean, if you kind of have your head in the sand around exactly what's going on, exactly what the financial position is for your firm, then you're hiding. And it's easy to hide behind the busyness of lawyering. It's easy to hide behind just there's so much going on. This needs to be a priority. If you don't know where your money is, if you don't know how much money you have and where it's going, that really sets you up to make some poor decisions down the road. So I really love it because it has you take responsibility by getting very clear on some of the principles outlined in the Profit First methodology. By the way, I didn't say this. If you haven't read the book or if you're not familiar with Profit First, it's by Mike Michalowicz. It's great. It's a good fundamental read. I actually listened to it on the audiobook and ran with it from there. So if you aren't familiar with it, I highly recommend it. I don't think it needs to be religion. Although I'm sure that Mike Michalowicz would disagree. I don't think it needs to be religion, but I think it's hugely helpful. So if you haven't heard of it, go learn about it. Okay, so that's one thing. And then Profit first methodology, it sort of forces you to not only know exactly what you have, but it forces you to see where your money is going. I kind of touched on this in the first point, but this is in and of itself something that this is the thing that people don't really have a grip on, is what I'm finding owners don't have a grip on. They know they're okay, right? Like they know they can cover their bills, but that does not mean they understand exactly how much money is going towards those things, right? They don't know exactly how much they have left over. They may not know if they have enough in their tax account to cover their taxes. Like it's all just kind of a blur, but they know they're doing well. Even if your business is going swimmingly, right? That doesn't mean that your finances are just as strong. So it's an easy, simple way to get a grip on what is going on financially in your business. Now, he encourages that initially you set up an income account. That's where all the revenue that's coming into the business goes into that account. And then from there, you would transfer into a profit account, a tax account, an operating expenses account, and then owners pay if that makes sense for your business. So the thing I want to comment on here is that, number one, you need to have the account, like these are all separate accounts, right? You need to have the accounts set up for you that make sense for your business. Without question, the income, profit, tax, and operating expense accounts make sense. There's no business out there that does not make sense for. But you could go further. One of the pushbacks I've received from clients who implement this is that, well, there's things that I invest in for my business that it doesn't really seem to fall into one of the accounts that he has mentioned. And so this just doesn't work for me. I'm like, well, set up another account. Like what? Just set up another account that you can allocate money to in an effort to either save for that thing or cover the expense for that investment, right? So an example is if there's some equipment that you want to get for your business. Maybe you need a slew of new computers or whatever it might be, right? Just a piece of equipment for your business. Then you could have an account set up specifically to save for that equipment. Or maybe it's an investment like with a coach, for example, or a program that you've been wanting to do, whatever. Then you have an account specifically set up to allocate money to that because it's a priority and it's important to you. Then that could be another account. You don't have to set up more accounts, but if you feel like something's missing, if you have something that you are deciding to put your money towards and you don't really know where else it fits inside of the profit, tax, or operating expenses accounts, then you can set up another account. So that's the other thing, is just be willing to be flexible, abide by the principles, but be willing to be flexible and get this set up in a way that makes sense for you and for your firm. Okay, that's one tweak that I find that clients like to make. The second tweak is adjusting the percentage allocations accordingly. When you read the book, he basically has these percentage allocations that he thinks are sort of for a standard business appropriate. So in the tax account, he says to allocate 15% of the incoming revenue towards tax. For operating expenses, I think he tells you to shoot for 30%. So on and so forth. There's an exercise he leads you through on the worksheet that's very important that you do, that has you look at your last 12 months and identify what have you currently been running at? What percentage of your revenue has been going towards these certain accounts, these certain things, or categories. That's a better way to say it, categories. But going forward, the important thing is to remember that, this is about progress, not perfection. And by the way, perfection is what's weird. If you're going to shoot for exactly the percentages he has stated that are healthy, he doesn't know your business. And he admits that in the book. This is just a guide for you. If you're noticing that last year you spent 70% of your income, the revenue that came in, towards operating expenses, and you would like to see that lower, then you need to set a goal and sort of a target for what that's going to look like for you this next year. Anything's possible, but it's unrealistic to go from like 70% to 20% and still have a functioning business at the level you're functioning. You're going to need to do it slower than that. So talking through this, I do talk through this with clients. If you're at 70% for operating expenses and you would like to see that lower, like you would like to get to 50% or to 40%, then this year we're shooting for 60%. And then the next year we're going to shoot for a little bit lower. And you may beat it, which is great, but it's about moving in the right direction and being very conscious of what's going on every week, every month in the business, right? Just having your finger on a pulse of it, not setting them and just forgetting all about it. So that's the other tweak I would say, is just adjust the percentage allocations as necessary for you in a responsible fashion, in a way that's making progress and not so fixated on perfection. Now, the benefits of having something like this set up. And again, the reason I like Profit First, most of the principles in Profit First, is because it's pretty straightforward once you get everything set up. And we will talk about setup in just a minute. The benefits are that you are not flying blind. If you don't have things set up this way, what I've noticed is that even if your accountant or your bookkeeper gives you a certain report at the end of every month, which most people aren't getting, but if they give you a report at the end of every month, it actually doesn't tell you a whole lot about where all your money is going, unless it's a hyper detailed report or you guys have something specific set up because you care that much about it. But what I'm finding is that most owners don't have that in place. And so even if they get a report, it doesn't mean a whole lot. They can draw certain conclusions, or they can have a hunch, if they can have a sinking feeling in their stomach when they get it because it's not looking so hot, or they could feel really good about it, but they don't know the details. And the principles behind Profit First allow you to understand the details about allocation and where your money is going better than a simple P&L statement can have that someone might be handing you at the end of every month. So that's one thing, is that you're just not flying blind anymore when you have this kind of ability. The other is that once you know the truth, right, then you can make financial decisions based on facts and not feelings. You can base your decisions on numbers and not hunches. This is one of the biggest differences between successful firm owners and those who are flying by the seat of their pants and operating more chaotically. I'm telling you, even if it's worked up to this point, flying by the seat of your pants and operating chaotically gets you so far, and then it gets you into trouble. And you don't even realize it until it's too late. People that have more sustainable, successful long-term businesses, it's because they're making responsible decisions based on facts and not feelings, based on numbers and not hunches. So if you aren't able to do that right now, then this is something I would highly encourage you to get organized around, is some of the principles of the Profit First methodology. One example of, probably the biggest example of making financial decisions based on facts, not feelings, is hiring. People hire too fast sometimes. And if you have been building a smart business and you've had your finger on the pulse of the finances the entire time, then that's not a problem, because you know exactly if you can afford that new person or not. But if you don't, and you just have this hunch that there's probably enough money there to be able to cover that, and you make that decision because you just feel so spread thin and everything, like you need that person, and so then you just go ahead and hire that person. Okay, like you're an adult and you get to make that decision, but you may be shooting yourself in the foot. I can't tell you how many times that's happened for owners where they have made that kind of decision, and then 4 or 5 months down the road, they realize that they're in the red, and they probably wouldn't have been had they not made that hire. And they felt like they needed to make the hire. They feel really torn about it all. But the truth is, the reason there's confusion and you feel torn inside is because your mind hasn't been straight around your finances for way too long. And so of course there's confusion and you feel conflicted about all of it because you need the person, but you don't have the money. You just wouldn't have made that decision if you knew that it was going to put you in the red. You just wouldn't have. So hiring is one of those examples where if you don't have the knowledge around your firm's financial situation, then you could get yourself in a sticky place. The other thing that's great about knowing exactly where your money is that then you can plan accordingly and feel great about some of the unnecessary but awesome things you want to do inside of your firm. It could be team outings. It could be celebrations of some sort. It could be, whatever it is that is sort of can be looked at as the extra. The extra goes a long way. The extra is fun. The extra keeps morale high. It keeps people pumped and motivated and working towards the vision. And if you can't afford that, there's ways that you can still do great things to show appreciation to your team without spending a lot of money. But money does afford you, if you know exactly where your money is and exactly what's being spent and exactly how much you have to do things like this, it can afford you a different kind of fun, a different level of fun every once in a while if you choose to. Okay, so now let's talk about some common barriers that you can experience when implementing Profit First, even just the basic principles of Profit First methodology. The biggest barrier probably that I hear the most, and something that was a barrier for me, was finding a bank to support multiple bank accounts without having a bunch of fees. And truthfully, I didn't allow that to be a barrier that kept me stuck. A lot of you probably didn't as well, but there are many of you out there who allow that barrier to prevent you from actually implementing this. And here's what I want to say to that. Get your house in order. Find the bank, the credit union, the financial institution that's going to give you the ability to have multiple accounts set up without being dinged with a bunch of fees. I asked actually a client of mine who was doing Profit First, I asked who they use, what bank they use, and I looked into it. I did a quick vetting, make sure that I didn't feel like this financial institution would cap my abilities as my business grew and that they had what I needed in place, and they totally did. It was the easiest thing. I mean, it's a pain in the rear in that you have to go down, like I had to go to a branch to be able to open up the business account. And for my bank, instead of having multiple accounts open, what they do is they have one business account and you can have several shares inside that account. So I have one business checking account and the shares inside of it, I have one called income, I have one called profit, I have one called tax, and I have one called operating expenses. And then you can add from there, right? And so I have all of that in place, and it took me about 2 hours to get accomplished from top to bottom once I had the bank identified. If you feel stuck by this, you probably know someone who is doing Profit First. Then ask for referrals. Ask your colleagues who they're using for Profit First. If you don't have that, you don't know anybody who's doing this, Mike Michalowicz has a resources page for Profit First for the book online. I think Profit First stuff is at mikemichalowicz.com. So if you go there, and I don't have his name in front of me to spell it for you, but just look up Mike Michalowicz, Profit First. You will know where to go. And he has a list of banks and financial institutions that support having multiple business accounts where you can make transfers very easily. So that's one barrier. And I just want to encourage you, don't let that be a barrier. Either ask around and figure out who people are using or go to his resources page and look up who supports this way of banking. A lot of times your bank will give you what you want if you ask for it. And if you tell them that you need things set up this way, you don't want to leave, can they help you out, right? A lot of times they'll bend. But if you do need to switch, that is a pain in the butt too. I had to do that. However, he actually walks you through just the things you need to think about, a bit of a timeline for yourself and how to make that switch It's almost like a short-term pain that you need to get through in order to have the long-term gains of being set up this way. That's the way to think about it. Yeah, it's not always convenient if you have to switch banks, and I do know that, but it's not a reason to continue to fly blind. Now, if all of this sounds overwhelming, I encourage you just sit down and make a plan for this. There are steps involved. One, you got to find the financial institution you're going to use. So figure that out. The second step is to determine which accounts you need to have set up, how many accounts you need to have set up, and at minimum, it's going to be income, profit, tax, and operating expenses. If you're on payroll, that might be it. Maybe you have another investment that you put a certain amount of money towards. You can create an account with that being named that. So that's the next thing that you'll be thinking about is the accounts you want set up. And then if you have to make a transition to a new bank, use the steps in the guide and Profit First and really get that set up for yourself. The last thing I would say about all of this is in order to make this work, and this is actually where I see current clients backsliding, in order to make this work, there is discipline involved in that I would say weekly at minimum, you need to log in and you need to transfer money from your income account, all the money that's come in. You need to transfer according to the percentages that you're allocating, you decided to allocate. Make transfers into each account from the income account. And the reason I say weekly minimum, I know in the book, I think he says the 10th and the 25th is what he recommends. There is a higher level of awareness that you can have around that, and being plugged in at least weekly, log into your bank, look at what's come in, and allocate properly is super empowering. It just is. So I do this once a week in my business. There's a lot of owners that decide to, because they have enough revenue coming in on a daily basis, they decide to make daily transfers. And that may sound cumbersome to some of you, but let me just tell you, the ones who make daily transfers are the ones who are most on top of everything. And it's the quickest. Like they log in, it takes them about 2 minutes to make their daily transfers, and they log out. And they're always on top of it. They always know where their money is going. They have their finger on the pulse of things. Yes, they still get a P&L at the end of every month. Yes, they still get, certain reporting and metrics that they want to see. But when it comes to the bank accounts, they log in and they take responsibility for what's there and how much is going into each account. That is a different level of awareness and understanding of the finances of your firm than normal. And so if daily transfers can make sense for you, if you do have deposits that are going in daily into your income account, then by all means, do it daily. For me and my business, weekly makes more sense. I don't have daily deposits coming in. So weekly, I sit down and do this. It's the greatest feeling to have this sense that you're staying on top of things. There's a respect around the money that's coming in and how you're divvying it up, instead of the money's coming in and you're spending and you think you're probably you're spending within your means. But, who knows, from month to month that varies. Like there's just not a lot of awareness unless you sit down and take the time to do this. And it doesn't take hardly any time at all once this is set up in place. So that is my little rant for you, or just sharing to you about an easy, simple way to get things set up and to be able to have a high level of awareness on the financial situation of your firm at any given time. It helps you to make responsible decisions inside of your business and figure out in what ways you need to grow, figure out in what ways you need to cut back, and finding ways to do that don't make the business suffer. This is all really good conversation that you can't have unless you understand the numbers. You're going on facts and not feelings. So that is what I have for you today. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next week. Thanks so much for listening to the Velocity Work Podcast. If you've enjoyed this podcast and you run your own law firm, you have to come see if the Velocity Work client experience is for you. Head over to hello.velocitywork.com to set up a free call. We can learn more about one another, answer any questions we may have for one another, and determine if the Velocity Work client experience is a right fit. I hope to connect with you soon. Show notes from this episode can be found at velocitywork.com/podcast.